Charles, welcome.
Hi, Gladys. Thanks so much for having me. Huge pleasure.
Yeah, great. And we'll talk mostly about Schmidt Science Fellowship today, like application cycle, tips and tricks that you personally used when you were applying. I think we interacted quite a bit when you were applying, so we'll talk about that. But before we go there, I want you to mention, maybe tell us who you are. And I find your research very curious on pangolins. I was searching the internet and I saw you had a very interesting interview with the National Geographic. A very interesting video. And you talked about pangolins and connection to COVID, I think. What is that?
Yeah, pangolins are really weird animals. They're evolutionarily distinct. That's to say, they're really special and quite unique. They are the only mammals with scales, but they're threatened a lot. So when you think about like illegal trade of animals, you think about elephants and rhinos, but pangolins also, fit that category. They're also they're less known, so not a lot of focus. They don't get a lot of attention. And so my research for my PhD looked at why people kill pangolins in the first place, in a traditional African setting. So in Nigeria, where meat from animals are consumed anyway for food, and you have this animal that has scales that are highly priced in other parts of the world, especially in Asia. Why are people killing the animals? Are they killing it for scales, or they're killing it for meats that they eat anyway? So that led me to talking to hunters, people who are usually not represented in this kind of debate. And we got really interesting perspective, actually different from what even pangolin conservationists think, was the reason why pangolins are killed.
No, I have many follow-up questions, but the most important one is, how did you, why not elephants or the other animals? Like, how did you just decide it's pangolins you'd research?
Pangolins, why not elephants? Because elephants get lots of attention. Okay. But obviously, I didn't think of it that way when I started. I wasn't really comparing species. I just got really fascinated. I grew up in a rural environment, rural community in Nigeria, and growing up, I saw lots of wild animals around my forest home, and so it was quite normal to see stuff. Not the big animals, quite small, your African porcupine and all that stuff. But I never saw anything that looked like a pangolin until I saw it on TV, and I was wondering why I never saw it around my home. And a few years later, I realized that pangolins are actually in the forest, the national park. That's just about less than 20 minutes away from my home, actually. Depends on which of the boundaries you go to. So really close. And a few years after that, I learned that pangolins are one of the most trafficked wild mammals. So that was my curiosity and, passion and everything put together to study pangolins, really.
Okay. And we'll talk briefly about all your academic journey from Nigeria to the UK, and all the academic endeavors you've had. But let's talk a lot. This video, I wanted us to chat about Schmidt Science Fellowship, because I don't think many people know about it, and I think it's a very great opportunity for PhD holders in STEM to try. So let's start from there. So congratulations first and foremost. I went through the process a long time ago, and it's not an easy thing. So first of all, congratulations. Tell us about Schmidt Science Fellowship. What are you currently, you are a Schmidt Science Fellow. What does that mean? Like, what is this Schmidt Science Fellowship? And what are you doing currently as a Schmidt Science Fellow? Then we'll go through the application process and your experiences so far.
Well, I like words to describe what the fellowship really is. I feel like, it's just this great community of people, like-minded, super inspiring, and amazing group of, post-PhD academics who are looking to do, amazing research in different fields. So the Schmidt Science Fellowship allows you to pivot to a different field. I haven't officially started. I start next week. But there's so much excitement. There's been lots of engagement, listening to what other fellows did for their PhD and what they will be doing for their, pivot and future research. And there's already lots of, plans to meet in person and have, skill building exercise and just think about ways that our research extends, transcends the scientific community to real life applications and policy. So, I'm excited. I'm really, 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 really pleased.
All right. So are you 2024 fellow or 2023?
I am 2024.
2020.
I'm 2024. And for my my postdoctoral research, I'm moving away from studying pangolins and why people kill them to looking at how to improve protected area management. So national parks, you've got the rangers, right? Let's call them the police officers of the parks. They go around detecting illegal activities and collecting large amounts of spatial data, including where they go to. I'm proposing to use all of that data to understand the patterns of different threats in the landscape and also their effort, just so we can help them improve the work that they do. And this time, not just from Nigeria, but Nigeria, hopefully Mozambique, Uganda, and even Cameroon and Gabon and a few other parks in other countries.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So, are you where is your postdoc institution?
So I did my postdoc will be at Harvard. My PhD was at Cambridge. So I'm moving from Cambridge to Harvard and from conservation biology and zoology to maths and computer science.
Wow, interesting. Which lab in Harvard?
So I'll be at the School of Applied Engineering. That's the Team Core Lab with Professor Milin Tambe.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you are excited about it. Did you say you will start next week? So you transition next week?
Yes, so I start my fellowship 1st of October.
Mm-hmm.
It's just been a long way in between, submitting a PhD and starting this, but it's been also really useful time to think exactly about what I want to do and how I, get some administrative work going as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. What do you think? What are you most looking forward to? Because I know there is the research part, there is the community aspect, the seminars, and all those things.
I'm looking forward to meeting other cohorts in members of my cohort in person. Doing a PhD was a very eye-opening experience for me, how much you pretty much need to drive your own research, and it's almost a single-person game. It's a team effort to an extent because you have your advisors and stuff, but there's almost just one player. There's almost one central player. And I was so lucky to be in a community where in a lab where we're very friendly and very, community focused, and my PI was amazing. And I was a bit skeptical about what the next phase will be because, apparently the higher you get, the more isolating it can become. But to be able to get, be at a, higher stage, but still have a group, community of people who are in different fields, obviously with, approaching different, trying to solve different problems and different backgrounds. I just think there's nothing better, in science. And, I feel like that could also improve the science that we do. Hopefully conversations spark, some collaborations, and we're able to take it from there. So, the next few months of meeting in person, or rather than meetings in-person meetings planned for the next few months will be the highlight for me, I think.
Mm-hmm. And very, very interesting you mentioned the in-person meetings, because I think even for me, those were really important. And they still continue doing in-person meetings even after the fellowship. And
Wow.
I've really enjoyed those. In one of the in-person meetings, we were chatting with another fellow. Actually, I don't know, 2022 fellow, I think. I am a 2019 fellow. And just out of a random conversation, and I think that is what Schmidt Science Fellowship is trying to do. It was just like, I can't remember the time, but it was just like random conversation. And we were talking about the way we, especially as, I don't know, like super achieving individuals, we rarely talk about our failures, and yet everyone has failed. And we were just like sharing, as like, there is this day I failed like this. I wrote a paper, it was rejected, and it was humbling and also challenging going through that failure. And I think you also shared about the failures you had gone through, like, like people say, oh, you've studied in this and this institution, but then they don't know like all the failures you've kind of gone through. And we decided to co-write our stories, and it was published in a Nature article, and it was really great. So anyway, so I think the in-person meeting with people from diverse backgrounds in terms of career, but also like in terms of upbringing, they tend to spark those curious ideas, be it in science or even outside science. So I think that would be amazing.
Yeah, congrats on the Nature paper. I remember reading it a while ago. It was really impressive and very thrilling to read. I agree with you about how much there's a lot of promotion of success in academia, and we need to, I don't think promote failure, but talk about failure. It is part of the process.
Yes. And in fact, and I think everyone can do their part in terms of talking about. So even in this channel, I try to like intentionally force people to talk about their challenges or failures. And we will talk about, you will share maybe one challenge or one failure that kind of changed your life towards the end. But yeah, I totally agree with you. So I wish you all the best as you begin your fellowship journey. I'm curious to know how you experienced it after such a number of years down the line. But from because we chatted quite a bit when you were applying. So now I think because I was making this video over the years, I've gotten people, because I've on my LinkedIn profile I added there that I'm a Schmidt Science Fellow, and occasionally I just get like random DMs. People saying, tell me more about it. How was your experience? How is the application process? Although there are some information on the website, but also there is, I would also want to hear like personal touches and personal stories on how people experienced the application process. So now this is the part where I put you on the spot and you tell us about how did you know about it first and foremost, and then how was the whole application process? Were you doubting yourself? Was it easy? Tips and tricks for the guys who are thinking of applying?
I think, first of all, doubting myself, absolutely. I've got a story to share about how I didn't apply the previous year because I wasn't even sure about the eligibility, if I met it. Was it hard? Yes, it was hard. I think it forces you to be unique. Obviously, we've got individual stories and we can't claim uniqueness, but it forces you to bring out that personal, that what makes you stand out from a crowd of 100 people, right? Doing the same thing, for example. So when I first learned about the Schmidt Science Fellowship, I was in the third year of my PhD, so 1 year left, and I saw it and I was considering applying, but it talked about being, I think it used the word lab, L-A-B, and I just thought, well, this lab must mean some medical lab, people who do experimental stuff. And I just felt, well, this is not for me. And I saw it again the year I was rounding on my PhD, and I thought, well, maybe I just made this up. Maybe lab is just lab, like we say in academia, right? Like my lab, your lab, and all that stuff. And so I got the email from my university. So the whole, university, newsletter. And I then wrote to the sender and asked for more information, and then they clarified that actually this means a general lab. And I was very excited. First of all, I thought, okay, everything looks good. I'm within the 2 years after PhD of applying, so I've got a real chance. But it's a really interesting application because, as you know, the university needs to nominate you. So I don't have the numbers of how many people get nominated, but you can imagine, right? There's a filtering process right from the start where you write this one pager, and in my case, there was no information what should be on the pager, right? Just talked about, your research and yourself, right? So it could be anything and everything. And then I got invited to apply, and the application, or rather, I got sent a unique link, and after that, submitted the application, which took me a while to write because, like I said, you need to be the questions. The questions were not your generic application questions. I remember one talked about explain something about a galvanizing personality. I was like, okay, yeah, something about how you have a galvanizing personality. First question was like, do I have a galvanizing personality? Well, I think maybe sometimes I do. Well, maybe not, but I think I've got something that could fit this in. So, having to think a lot about those experiences and those interactions and just having conversations with my peers and my friends and saying, hey, what do you think about this question? You've known me for X number of years. Do you think I could claim something here? Do you think I fit this? Is there any example you can provide for me? And after submitting the application, it took about 8 months or 9 to get the, can't remember exactly, but at least 6 months to get the first email, requesting an interview. And the interview was about 2 months later. And then the news was, communicated about 2 months later as well. So everything from that first submission or application for nomination through my university lasted about a year. So it's a very lengthy process. And there's also information on the website about how much there is almost like a cross-validation of the reviews, the independent reviews in-house that's within Schmidt. So I think they really do they do a good job of selecting people and making sure that, all the boxes are ticked.
So about 1 year from the time you apply?
Yeah. From the time that about a year from the submission, from the application for nomination, that's from Cambridge University, to hearing the news, it was almost a year.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I would want you to talk briefly about the interviewing process, but before we go there, I think we have to mention that the fellowship is trying to expand the list of the nominating institutions, but I think as at now, it's just like a handful of them. So I think people should just check the website first and foremost to see if the institution can nominate them. But do you remember if there was anything that you did, I don't know, like that you think set you apart when you were going through the institutional nomination? Did you, so because for instance, I remember when I was, and I know the application process has changed slightly from when I applied in 2018, but I remember trying to flash out the key things that Schmidt Science Fellowship was looking for when I was requesting reference from my advisor, because I think that was one of the documents they wanted from the institution, like the institution wanted from my advisor, so that they should list a couple of us. Do you remember some things, or just pieces of advice for the students who are currently looking into applying first and foremost to be nominated by the institution before even they go to the real or the other side of the application from the fellowship side?
Before talking about that, I just want to also stress and agree with you on the need for the nomination institutions to expand beyond what it currently is. I feel like Schmidt is quite restricted in that sense. I don't know the geographic spread, but I do not think all universities have the ability to nominate. And I think that needs to change, especially if we need to get representation across the world, across board. So it's quite a shame somebody who's really qualified, who's got a great project, but just don't have, it's not linked to a nominating institution. What do? You just can apply. And I think hopefully that changes. regarding the advice to, that initial stage and initial phase, I think that's the part where you really need to think about what your pivot is. Obviously, you flesh it out much, much more in the real application, but this is an elevator pitch, right? Because you have one page, in my instance, one page to talk about your project and to talk about yourself, right? And Schmidt is big on the pivot, right? So this is not just funding for a postdoc degree, right? It's something, for postdoctoral research. It's something that's different from what you're currently doing. And so it might be interesting, but it may be too similar to what you're currently doing. But it may, on the other hand, it might be really interesting, but it might be too far-fetched from what you're currently doing that there's no link. And then somebody who's reading it just feels like, okay, you're a dreamer, right? And so I would thinking about what that pivot is in such a way that it's different from your current project, but also there is a link, there's something that ties it together that gives the reviewer or whoever the assurance that this person is able to deliver and they've got transferable skills, for example, and communicating that with your PI, because remember, your PI is going to know a lot about your current research and the things that you've done, but not so much about the pivot, ideally, because it's going to be in a different field. And right, so you need to be able to have that communication and perhaps even a space to brainstorm. And one thing I would also say is it's always nice to just have one thing extra that sets you apart, on an academic, ranking, you talk about first class degrees, fellowships, scholarships. You won't be the only one who've got those, but you might be the only one to, I don't know, find an ant, a rare ant on the, on the top of a tree that then was used to discover whatever, like just something that sets you apart, something that is not just all hard work and there's a little bit of passion as well. And a personal story is always nice. Obviously the personal story comes from you sometimes, but if your advisor can also put a personal story about what you're currently doing, links to something that you're passionate about, whatever it might be, it's always good to have pointers. I always do that. I know my advisor knows me well, and I'm not writing a reference for them, but I'm saying, in light of the requirements of this fellowship, can you please highlight these 3 things? And here are examples of how I've done it. Everybody's busy, so you have to help them do a good job for you.
Yeah. No, I totally agree, especially with the part of helping them. And sometimes they might not have all the information about what the fellowship is looking for. For instance, this fellowship is looking for leadership and interdisciplinarity and all these other things that they mention on their eligibility criteria. And I think it's important to either send the links to the advisor or, like you mentioned, flash those things out, and even maybe give some examples from your own life in case they don't have.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Do you think there was, because I know they talk about interdisciplinary science or scientists who are interested in interdisciplinary science and leadership skills, I think. Do you think there were, outside the science, do you think there were some things that set you apart from what you've just described? Or do you think they were big on leadership from your own experience, leadership or anything else?
I think leadership for sure. I think leadership was a big one. And my understanding was that they were not really keen about being like the president of a society or the founder of an organization, but just being able to galvanize people towards a cause. Being part of something that's greater than your research, being able to let your passion lead. I thought it was a very, very encompassing definition of leadership. And this was this was a feeling I got from my interview, which I reckon we'll talk about. But even just writing it, and having chatted to you and a few other people, it just made sense that I need to talk about ways that I have tried to pull people together. So an example is I am passionate about pangolins very, very much, and so things that I have done in the past, say run in a pangolin suit, right, in a 6 kg pangolin suit for 8 hours straight. about 50 something kilometers, right? Trying to raise awareness. Now, and I wasn't leading anybody. I wasn't running in front of people. I just ran and raised money, and that money went to conservation. I think that's a form of leadership, right? Because it's leadership because you are getting people involved, you're galvanizing potential and all that stuff. So, I would think about leadership from a broad sense, from what a dictionary would define it, to be something that allows you to show your passion, and again, to use the word galvanize potential or galvanize support for cause that you care about.
Mm-hmm. Oh, definitely! Wow, I did not know about that story, but definitely that is amazing. That is really amazing, and also an innovative because you looked for something within reach that you can use to raise awareness.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah. So let's talk about the interviews. How many rounds of interviews did you go through, and how were they generally from what you remember? Was it this year or last year when you went through the interviews?
Interviews, I think it was in December or January. I think it was
Okay.
January.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Oh.
Early Jan.
Mm-hmm.
It was just one round. It was just one round of, I think, 45 minutes to an hour. Can't remember exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I thought my interview was great. I enjoyed my interview a lot. It's one of those rare interviews when you come out and say, I'm happy with the outcome no matter what, because
Okay.
you feel like you gave it your best. You just have a good feeling about it, right? And it doesn't always turn out to be a good outcome, because I've had one of those when you feel great, but then it's like, well, sorry to let you know that you didn't do well. But
Yeah.
I thought it was good because I felt like the panel, were happy to chat to me and to learn more about my work, and they were engaged all throughout the interview. It was not just we'll ask you a question and we'll look for a way to trip you. And I kind of got that early on. And how I realized that was because when I was talking, I could see people giving like physical expressions, nodding head, smiling, and sometimes I didn't get any of those after speaking for like 30 seconds, and I realized, okay, I'm not hitting a note here. So I was trying to like let them give me a cue on what to really push on, and whether my answers were good enough. For example, a question at the end, if I didn't get a really emphatic expression, I kind of just said, and one more thing. And I just, as much as I can, think about something that, makes it end on a good note. And I actually got really good feedback during the interview. Halfway, somebody told me, Charles, I really love your energy. Your energy is so exciting, and I am so excited about this. And I just thought, wow, I don't know what this means, but I'm excited, and it doesn't mean I answered all the questions or I answered all of them correctly. I think one question that threw me off, was, what activities do you engage in that help you shape your research ideas and your research or something around, I can't remember, but something around the framing of what do you do that help you see societal problems in the world that are worth targeting with your research? Like, how do you gain that inspiration for your research, more or less? And I just thought, what, how do I do this? And what came to mind was me interacting with people from, within the African society, because I am keen on, helping developments on the continent. And I think I mentioned something else, but then after the interview, I realized there's one thing that I really do that I did not remember, which is listening to podcasts. So I listen to, not all the time, but on average, daily, like TED Talks, the daily, podcasts. And I also listen to, some BBC podcasts about news on Africa. And so these are things I do. And I always think about how can this feed into my research? So it was really interesting that I could not remember that during the interview. But again, that's to say, like, I didn't feel like the question was really meant to trip me. It was meant to really make me think about ways that I draw information from the world around me. So on the whole, well, the good thing is that, I guess the good and the bad depends on how you see it. I got sent, I don't know how it would be or how it was in the past. I got sent a list of the panel, but I Googled them. I tried to understand where they were coming from in terms of industry, academia, what their fields were, so I know how deep or like shallow I should go into my explanation of concept. But I didn't want to go too deep into like researching a person, right? Like ideology and all that stuff. I thought it wasn't necessary. And so I got into the room feeling very comfortable, knowing who was who, also like addressing people by name. I think I got that tip from you actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like addressing people by name and saying their title and all that stuff. And so I really got comfortable in that my brain was not trying to be like, oh, is this Gladys? Is this Charles? Who's this? And so I really got comfortable. And that was the most I did in terms of the pre-interview prep regarding the people. And then I just thought, well, I'll go into this and have a nice conversation and hopefully it is a nice conversation. And I thought it was a nice conversation.
Yeah, it sounds, you are the first person who, one of the few people who say they enjoyed an interview as high profile as Schmidt Science Fellowship. But I think those guys, they do try to be friendly so that people are free and they can express their ideas freely. Was it virtual or in person?
It was virtual.
Okay. How many were they?
There were at least 5.
Okay.
Yeah, at least 5.
Okay. Oh, but you guys did amazing, because I think it's a bit tricky managing making rapport on through a virtual space. At least ours was in person, and it was very easy for your personality and to make rapport when you see people in person. But yeah, okay. How many were you shortlisted, and how many were you selected at the end of the interview?
I think 32 people were selected.
Okay.
I'm not entirely sure, but I think so. I should check. And I don't know how many people were shortlisted for the interview, but I know that about 400 people were nominated by their institution that year. So that would be, I don't know, 8% success rate. So yeah, I think that's the stats that I know. But I would think they should have at least double that number interviewing. So maybe, 2 to 3 times that number, something around, I don't know, 90 or 100 people, I would think, interviewed.
Okay. All right. If you were to give one lesson or one piece of advice to the guys who are currently looking into applying for Schmidt Science Fellowship, what would you tell them?
I think the pivot might arguably be the most important thing for your application. Obviously, if you feel like you're competitive, then you're probably competitive, right? If you think you've got, if you think you can win the fellowship, I think you probably can win it. Obviously, so many factors come into play, but your pivot might actually be the thing that wins or, tears it apart for you. And so I would think you want to think hard about what you will be pivoting towards, right? Like, academia is unrestricted, right? You can leave today and say you want to study frogs from studying the moon, right? If you can get money for it, you can do it. Yeah. But the hard thing will be getting money for it, right? But I feel like whoever is investing in it will want to, obviously it's an investment, will want to think about what the connection is. Why is it important? Can this person do it? Why do I not just find X person who studies frogs already? And so while this is about career development and, the Schmidt Science Fellowship is really there to help the careers of, promising young people, there needs to be a clear path. There needs to be a really good pivot, and it needs to be grounded in your person. And in that as well, it's helpful to think about something that sets you apart. I just cannot overemphasize that, right? Something that perhaps ties to your personal story, that makes it a pivot that nobody else on the planet, will ever think about, will ever propose if everybody applied. Something that positions you well to do that work in a way that nobody else might ever do it, but also positions you possibly to foster the implementation of the findings from your work in a way that nobody else will ever do it. So in my instance, I went back to the roots, right? So pangolins PhD, and I looked at why people kill pangolins, looking at the, cultural practice of killing animals for food, right? And then I worked with hunters, so many hunters in the landscape. And what I said was, Schmidt, give me money, please give me money, obviously, please, I'm begging you, please give me money to understand the different, improve protected area management, looking at the data that rangers collect. But there's always bias in this data, because when rangers go out, they don't always go out to where hunters would have gone out to. So I am now coming in with my relationship with hunters in Nigeria to collect spatial data from hunters. That's never been done before, for this kind of work, to my, in the best of my knowledge, to then, correct the bias in the data from the rangers, to improve any models that we do. And, I will then this is only possible because I've worked in this landscape for the last 5 years. I know the hunters, I have a good relationship, but also the data that I'm proposing to use will come from an organization that I'm a part of. And I'm using data from more than one protected area, actually a couple of countries. And this work has never been done where you use spatial data from rangers because of the sensitivity of the data, right? So I was thinking about things that it will be really hard for somebody else to say, I have access to the ranger data. I also have access to the hunter data, but also I do have the network to support the implementation of this research, because the data that will be given to me by this organization will be fed back to the organization who help organize the platform that the data is collected in. So there were so many moving components that if you read this, my application was quite, I would think, and that was the plan, to go in with a unique selling point to say, my pivot is this to this, and the pivot ties, the project is so Charles linked that if you give the money to somebody else, they may not really succeed as much as I would do. So I really encourage, the listeners, I really encourage you to think about ways. It may not always be so clear cut, but I think there's something you can put in there. If you're interested in something, there is a reason why you're interested in something, right? You might be able to tell a nice story, and just make your proposal much more than words on paper, but something that connects to somebody somewhere. And you can always bring that up in your interviews. It also helps for the panel to know this person based on this conversation and all that stuff. That was a really long answer.
No, but thank you for, I actually feel like you've actually mentioned exactly what you need to do to win it. Because if you can write very well about the research and the pivot, or the new area you want to research, and then you tie that to your unique selling point, be it in terms of upbringing or your personal experiences and whatever, no one else can replicate that. Not even AI, right? And I think it will be very unique. It's very unique, and I love that.
Great.
Really love that. Actually, talking about pivot, what is this pivot, and how? I think the question that I keep getting is, how should my research be different from what I'm doing? Like, should I abandon biology and go into computer science? I know. I think from the website there is an explanation for that. But what do you have to say concerning this pivot?
A few things. First of all, I know for a fact that Schmidt does not want a methodological pivot. It's not that you were studying pangolins using data from, let's just say, for argument's sake, remote sensing, right? And then you are now wanting to study pangolins using data from interview data, right? Just to see it's not a shift in methods, but something that moves you away from discipline. So, that lets you sit within the different departments, ideally learn the skills that they learn. You might also be like, you might be moving from, cell biology, for example, in conservation to, neuroscience, right? Looking at something in the brain, or I don't know. It could be that broad. In my case, I don't think my pivot was so like off. But so I'm in conservation, and I've done all these things with pangolins using largely, data collected as quantitative data, but set within some socioeconomic, social study type, system. And now I'm using hardcore spatial data, from, different areas. And I'm saying, hey, I can only use this data. I can only analyze this data properly if I apply AI methods. Without that, there's no chance. And I don't know anything about AI, and I want to learn AI in this. So I'm now moving. I'm still, it's a conservation problem, no doubt, but I am now moving away from conservation to, computer science, where I learn different skills and then I apply to the data. And it's not just about, again, I feel like this might contradict what I said about the methodological pivot, but it's more than just the method here. Because first of all, I never did any spatial stuff. So that's a pivot in itself. I never did any, remote sensing stuff. And moving away from conservation, to, computer science with this data set opens up so many opportunities. And so it could be a pivot like the neuroscience cell biology one that I talked about, that, I don't know how, divergent they are, but in my head, they kind of are. But it could be something that's still linked. I think regardless of what it is, somebody should be able to look at it and actually say, okay, this person is changing disciplines. First of all, if it's in any way an extension of your PhD, that's not a pivot. So that's like the first box to tick. Is this an extension of my PhD? Because I think that's the first thing the Schmidt, the assessors look as well. Because down the line, you get to, when you get selected, you get to chat about why, or rather talk about your main proposal and just have, really, in-depth conversation. And one of the things that keeps stressing is that nothing needs to be an extension of your PhD. While they want you to do, like research that you really love and care about, the idea is for you to learn amazing new skills, right? And also failure or failing is not a concern here, because pretty much there are no set, expected outcomes. It's just about doing it and getting the skills and moving on. So if it's close to your PhD in a way that somebody needs to read it again to find a link between, the PhD and the pivot, then I think you may need to reconsider it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. I think that I like that explanation. Let's talk about, I want to do like just a summary of your PhD experience, and maybe this would be a great time to bring up one challenge or one failure, because through the PhD process, you cannot miss a failure or a challenge. So tell us about your PhD experience. Where were you doing your PhD? And you've mentioned you were studying pangolins. So just as if you're explaining to my grandma, what was this PhD about, and just summarize your PhD experience.
So for the PhD, I looked at, my PhD was in Nigeria, the field work, but I was based at Cambridge University, and I was interested in an animal called pangolin. So pangolins are, 8, species of animals. So just types of animals that are only in Africa and Asia. And they're the only animals that have got scales in their body. So what fish have got, right? Those are scales. Mammals usually, did I say the only animals? Sorry, the only mammals. Mammals usually don't have scales, but pangolins have scales, and that shows how different they are from us, that are mammals as well. In some cultures in the world, people believe that the scales pangolins have medicinal properties. You can see, right? It makes sense. If something is unique, something is rare, it must stand for something. But scientifically, empirical science as we know it, or Western science, has shown that actually is the same component in our hair and our fingernails. But because of this, pangolins have been killed much more than your average porcupine, your average, or, animal. And there's huge demand for pangolins in Asia, and that demand has shifted to the ones in Africa. But before that demand came, people have been killing pangolins in Nigeria, in Kenya, for example, in other places where there are pangolins, and people might be killing them for food. But we don't know now whether the exploitation that we see in pangolins is because of that overseas demand or the local demand for meat. So that's what I was trying to understand. Why are people killing pangolins? And to do that, you have to talk to the people who were killing pangolins. So I spoke to hunters, I spoke to people who were selling pangolins, and I also engaged with the Nigeria Customs Service. So these are people who would confiscate illegally traded scales or sometimes meat across borders. And my experience on the whole, I thought was really positive. So there's so many things I learned during a PhD. First of all, I learned that passion is pretty much what you need. It needs to be a constant. Passion needs to be a constant in your research, but it's not enough to do really good, impactful research. You need to be open to learning, and not everybody gets this, but you need to be in a supportive environment as well. And I think that helps. I was in a very supportive environment, and that helped me realize how little I knew about something I thought I knew a lot about. And now I've left the PhD feeling like I know less than I actually did when before I started the PhD, which I guess is a good thing. But so my experience was very positive. I definitely went in. My first proposal was to go into the forest, find pangolins and put GPS trackers on them and let them, understand where they go and what they do. I did that, but I failed a lot because pangolins are really hard to tag. They're hard to find. And so I had to pivot. Actually, I had to pivot really quickly to chatting to hunters when I realized that was really difficult. So that's how this whole thing came about, chatting to hunters, because if you think about it, these are people doing illegal activities, right? I would not have thought about it turned out to be really fruitful and quite easier than I thought, but I would never have proposed it initially. But, with all my experience, I was also attentive to what people were saying, and I saw an opportunity there and I took it. So that was the first challenge, which was, my PhD was going to fail if I don't see pangolins. And then when I saw pangolins, I wasn't able to tag them. I tagged them, but I wasn't getting useful data. So thinking about something else. Another one was that during the pandemic, there were some claims about COVID likely originating from or through pangolins and all that stuff. That was a personal concern for me because at the time I was still tagging animals. So holding pangolins, in the forest, and, what am I going to do? Am I going to stop? Am I going to continue? I'm fearing for my life. I turned out fine. I had COVID, but I don't think it was from any of the pangolins that I interacted with. But then, moving on to that, I think one big scientific failure that I look back on and I just academic rookie was that when I started collecting data on what the hunters were doing. So the hunters in this instance don't know I'm interested in pangolins. I'm just saying I want to understand what you do when you go in the forest and how many animals you catch. So I'm going to recruit somebody from your community who would collect this information as soon as you come back. So they'll keep an eye on you. I was not collecting data on the times when the hunters went out and got back without killing anything. So I was ignoring the negatives, if you like. And that caused a really big challenge down the line because I couldn't see, for example, the probability of hunting success. Say, or let's just say the percentage. How many times was the percentage, percentage point of going out and coming back without catching something? I didn't have that data. Yeah, that's useful data, but it's nothing, right? It's nothing. It's zero, but it's so important, It was like a year and a half down the line, my supervisor realized I'm not collecting the data. And we're like, oh, damn, we need to. And so I look back at that and I'm like, Well, first of all, it goes back to really good research planning and thinking about, and as for, now what I do is I have a model for, like a dummy variable looking at what I will be feeding in and just getting everything ready. So you see it. But, I look back and I was like, well, I had to learn it the hard way. So, yeah, that was one of the times that I failed. And I still have some data that, yeah, it's not complete in that sense, but so much learning from that experience, I think.
Thank you for sharing. And the reason why we can talk about the positives, and I think we are always posting on LinkedIn, right? About, oh, I defended my thesis, I reached this milestone. But all these challenges, we never talk about them. And that's why, like, I'm intentionally like trying to talk about the low sides so that anyone going through the process, any research process really, and I think particularly the PhD, it's a largely learning process, and all these mistakes, you tend to make them. We were chatting with a friend, and in reflection, I think my PhD took around 4 years. And if I was to go back, I would finish in 1 year or even less. because I made so many mistakes. I learned a lot.
Yeah.
I think many people can say that, right? Like, if you know what you know now, you know that you need to like be maybe running parallel projects at one go. Maybe do not hesitate too much. Do not overplan. I think I was overplanning things, and I did not know that even if you overplan 150%, things might not work, and you have to repeat. And I think just that skill of planning 50%, and as long as you're 50% ready, you start and iterate as fast as possible. Anyway, some of the lessons that I learned from my PhD, but I'm always curious to see what other people, the challenges and the failures, sort of to say, just as comfort for the guys going through the be it a PhD or whatever. But yeah, thank you for sharing that.
No, thanks for sharing as well. I agree with you about starting, early, and obviously have a plan, but start early because there might be loopholes in that plan and you don't know what they are until you actually start. So yeah, I agree. And thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, great. So we are close to the end, and before we end, I normally like to ask these random 2 questions. So the first question is, and I have a feeling that I know what you would say as the answer, but I'm curious to know what people see as like on top of the list. I know in the world we have like a lot of problems, but like on top of the list, when you look at the world, what do you see as the biggest problem in the world? That if you had all the powers at the moment, you'll just like change it?
I'm torn between hunger and peace.
Okay, I was thinking of things to do with pangolins, but yeah,
No,
okay, I was wrong.
Honestly, no, that would not say, I mean, it might feed into hunger, given that, pangolins fall within largely food systems in some part of the world. But I just think about the basics, right? It's survival, right? Not everybody's thriving, and not everybody would thrive at the same. I mean, people thrive at different points, right? Not everybody thrives throughout their life. Some survive, some thrive, but at any given point, you want everybody to at least have something. And I think it comes down to food and just like peace, right? Like, so it would be one of that for me. It's always hard to separate them. They're so linked, especially when there's like conflict, there's hunger. But yeah, maybe a future pivot there.
Okay. Yes, I like that idea, and I think I agree with you as being one of the biggest problems in the world. Before I ask the last question, I actually forgot to ask, how did you find yourself in the UK in at Cambridge from Nigeria? You mentioned.
Yeah, so I applied. I did a master's, a BSc in Nigeria, Forestry and Wildlife Management. Worked for 2 years with an organization called the Wildlife Conservation Society, and then I applied to a master's at Oxford, where I met you. Where I learned about all your work, and you were a strong inspiration. including the Schmidt, actually. I remember when you talked about the Schmidt, then I didn't know what the Schmidt was, but I think it was just random barbecue. When you talked about your research and then you talked about winning this fellowship. I couldn't place two and two together, but when I was looking at the website, I saw you and all that stuff. I was like, oh, that's what you were talking about. And, so I contacted you. So yeah, after that, after the master's in Oxford for a year, did the PhD in Cambridge, and then applied for the Schmidt. So that's a snippet of my journey.
Okay, great. So now that I have a rough picture of your academic journey from Nigeria through the UK, and now you are transitioning to the US, when you look back to, I don't know, 20 years ago when you were young, schooling in Nigeria, and the journey, interesting and inspirational journey that you've traveled, what would you say is one lesson you've learned in life?
Persistence and dreaming big. I think there's so much anybody can do with hard work and honesty, right? Because there's so much you can do it, through dishonesty as well. But in terms of honest means, right? Like, I always think to myself, people who cannot dream, and it's not always a function of their lack of ability, but your society. You're in a situation where you've been like modeled into some, I don't know, into some figure where you can't break through. I think that's one of the worst things that could happen to anybody who's like, whole. And so dreaming, yeah, I don't take that for granted. Obviously, the dreams don't come to pass. They don't come to pass. But without a dream, I don't think people would be motivated to do things on their own. And persistence, and on dreaming, there's some things that I look back and I'm like, wow, I can't believe I did that. So one is that there's this individual award called, I think, the Whitley Award in conservation. It's huge. It's, I think it's referred to as the Oscars of conservation, something like that. So it's really prestigious. I applied for that award 1 year after I left university. I mean, the answer. I didn't get it, But that was me just thinking. I mean, I had nothing to show for it. I don't know what. I don't know. I don't think I was cocky. I think I was just thinking everything is possible, And so I applied for that. Right now, I don't think if I applied, I would get it. That's how, even now that I know more about it, I mean, I still intend to apply in the future, but you know what I mean about that dream and this, there's just sometimes I've just thought, I never thought about coming to Oxford or Cambridge. Honestly, I thought these are places that only existed in books and like TVs. So I don't think all the dreams were so targeted to one thing, but I always thought about exploring the world and, like doing research in the environment and conservation. And so the dream was on the one hand, and I tried my best to put the work, just apply. You never know, especially, sometimes it costs you nothing other than time, right? If you're lucky, you get application fees waived, you get people who are happy to chat to you, you get on LinkedIn, you speak to somebody. And so, as much as you dream, there needs to be the action as well. So I would think those are the two things that I look back upon and I'm really glad. And I do have some dreams that I never pursued. So growing up, I badly wanted to become an astronaut. And then I thought, it's just impossible. I've not got great mathematical skills because I realized you really need them. And I kind of gave up on that. Well, I look back, maybe it's too late. I don't know. I'm happy now. So that's what matters. But I'm not saying I pursued, I followed all my dreams, and I really wish I did, but, I think that's one of the most important things that any human can have, just being able to dream. And I don't mean sleeping at night and dreaming, but like having a vision for yourself.
I will not add anything to that because I think I relate a lot to what you just shared. Totally agree. And of course, well done for the journey that you've traveled, and a lot of things that I know you will achieve in the coming years. So all the best, Charles, and appreciation for you creating time to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure to chat to you. And also, thanks for being an inspiration. I'm not just saying this because I'm here. I'm giving you a concrete example of how, you kind of inspired this whole Schmidt journey, and also your kindness to chat, initially. And like I said, you gave a nice tip that I thought was handy during the interview. So thank you as well.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really appreciate
Yeah.
that kind compliment.